Welcome to my first video diary. I've been brewing beer since April of 2011. My wife bought me a homebrew kit. I'd never brewed beer before and got hooked on the actual experience. And now I've been brewing a few different types of beers, from wheat beers, Weiss beers, right the way up to bitter. So this is a video diary to basically show the Muntons Winter Warmer, which I'm brewing at the moment. The date is the 19th of November. So if I back out from the video, various bits and pieces that I use to help me with brewing. I think most of you will be familiar with certainly bits of the items on the table here. What I'm going to sort of show you now is this is the packet of yeast that's actually shipped with the kit. And I'm not actually going to use the yeast. I'm going to actually use another yeast. I've been reading up on various yeasts, and I've decided to go for the Saf Fail SO4, which reading up on it basically says that it's quite a good yeast to make sort of a British beer. Other items that you'll see, there's my airlock, which will come into play later. That's my sterilising agent that I've been using. I've been reading up on various bits and pieces. There's a book that was bought for me which helps me with some sort of techniques. And then I have essentially 100 millilitres of boiled water, which is chilling down at the moment so that I can make a yeast emulsion. So we just go over, here are the two cans. The cans at the moment are sat in hot water, so that can actually release the malt extract and the molasses that's inside the cans themselves. This kit doesn't, as you can see, it's a dual can kit of malt extract, and therefore I don't actually have to add any additional sugar to the first primary fermentation. The work surface, what I do is I actually boil the kettle, and then I pour boiling hot water on the draining board. It's stainless steel, and therefore it becomes relatively clean and free from bacteria and that kind of stuff, which can obviously endanger the beer. Some other items, there's my sample flask that I actually collect the beer in to do the primary hydrometer reading, and the hydrometer's behind it, and then there's my measuring jug that I use to measure out the water. My primary fermentation vessel is this. As you can probably see, it's a Cooper's vessel. I started off with a Young's vessel, and I have also a Cooper's vessel, which is one here. This is the one I'm using today. I've actually removed the inner sort of nozzle at the bottom of the actual tap there, because I find that when I'm decanting the beer, it sort of gets in the way, and I can catch the beer, on certainly more of the beer, when I actually decant it. What's going on at the moment inside here? It's actually sterilising. So I've got well, let me unscrew it. So let me unscrew the lid. So inside here, you can see the lid, the airlock hole through it, and inside here you can see the rubber gasket, the large screw, the large spoon, and also the airlock is down there at the bottom. So this has been sterilising now for a couple of minutes, and smells quite sort of chlorine-y, so hopefully that will be all done and dusted. I've already pre-boiled the kettle, so the kettle's pre-boiled, and I'm going to essentially pour some of the kettle water into the jug. The Muntons label, basically instructions for the Muntons are here, for those of you who can see that. Essentially what I have to do is I have to add 6 pints of boiling water, and then obviously add the two contents of the cans, and then finally add 25 pints, 14.2 litres of cold water over the top of the mix, and then stir vigorously, obviously aerated a lot, and hopefully by then obviously I'll have got the emulsion of the yeast as well. So I'm going to stop now, and so what I'm doing now is I've just emptied out the cleaning agent, and this is just cold water to rinse out the actual fermentation barrel, so that it doesn't affect the yeast and is all nice and sterilised. So for this bit I'm actually going to just put in the gasket on the lid of the primary fermentation area. I already washed it down a bit. and just pushing it in at the moment. I find that certainly the Cooper's lid, when I first got it, like most brewers, you get paranoid at watching the airlock bubbling, and for some reason obviously you think that the beer's not working if you don't see the airlock bubbling, which isn't strictly true, because obviously there is CO2 being generated by the yeast. But I find if I actually take the gasket off, put it into the cleaning solution, and then cover it with essentially lubricant. You can use whatever lubricant you like. Technically you don't want to use one which is made out of petroleum jelly. You probably want a water-based lubricant, and for those of you out there, that's probably going to be something like KY jelly or something of that nature. And definitely don't go for something which is flavoured, because obviously that may have a detrimental effect on the flavour of your beer. But yeah, I put a lubricant on there, and that seems to make a good seal when I actually tighten it up. Primary fermentation vessel is now clear and empty. A little bit of water residue in there, but fundamentally it's clean, and I'll just pour that last bit of water out. So I'm about ready to actually pour and open these cans up. So what I need to do now is to get that process going. I've already boiled the kettle, so now what I do is I want to actually make up essentially 6 pints of hot water. As you can see there, there's a 3-pint mark. So if I just fill that up, doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. I found close to 3 pints as is possible. You should see, just get to 3 pints. There we go. And now I have 3 pints, and then I'll just boil the kettle again, and I'll pour that in to the mix. So I've just tested the water that we have inside here. It feels around about sort of the 20 degrees mark, so it's probably well, between 20 and 30. So it's probably okay to actually pitch the yeast on it at the moment. Swirl it around a bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the yeast and add it into the sterilised water, and then what I'll do is I'll let that sort of emulsion develop for about sort of 15 minutes, then whisk it up, and then you'll sort of see the content of the yeast itself. But it should give me a lot of time between doing that and actually then putting in the malt extract into the pot, which is the next thing you'll see me do after I put the yeast in. Okay, so I'm now just going to sprinkle on the yeast over the top, and then I'm going to cover it up to try and make sure that there's no contaminants that go into it. And I'm just going to leave it like that, and I'm going to put the timer on for 15 minutes, and then obviously get the mix up the yeast and turn it into a paste and leave it for another couple of minutes, and then obviously aerate the actual wort, and then pitch the yeast over the top of it. Okay, this is the next section. This is the malt extract. Try and show you it. Very thick, very dark. Tasted it, nice bittery taste. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pour it into the bottom of the primary fermentation vessel. See that it's coming out nice and thick. I'm just going to scoop that round so that I catch it all, and then like what most people do, so here's one of my 3 litres of water, and I'm just going to pour a chunk of that. Now it's cooled down a bit, so I can actually hold it for a while, and then I'm just going to rock it round like this. Really roll it round, see if you can get as much of the good stuff out of it as possible, and then pour it over the top. Again, get some more of the extract out. There's quite a bit coming out of that, as you can see. So again, just swing it around. now just filling up the can in the sink, which you can't see, but filling it right up now with the rest of the water. Just move this bin out of the way. And getting the spoon, just give me a good stir. So what I want to do is get all of that malt extract out of the can. You're not going to get it all out, so don't feel that it's absolutely imperative to get every last drop out, but there's certainly quite a bit that gets left in the can if you don't do this, and on the lid. So I definitely do this as one of my primary steps. We've got the water in there, and I'll probably just stir it up a bit as well. Yeah, it's very thick. So with the correct number of pints now poured into it, the mark's on the outside of we should get to around about 20 litres, so just been doing a bit of calculation in my head, and I think I've got the right amount now. I certainly used 3 litres of hot water. Pretty sure I used all of the hot water, but now what I may do is just top it up by another little bit more. Just add a little bit more cold water on it. It's not going to hurt. It's just going to maybe drop the. It's all to do with how much alcohol that you get at the end of it. So maybe I'll just top it up with a bit more water. There you go. So that to me is probably around about 20 litres, which is what I want. Now you can see the water inside here. I really mix this stuff up and get it very frothy. As you can see, I tend to froth it all up really quite. So I get a very nice fluffy head on the back of it. This is called aerating the wort. Some people actually use sort of like a little air block, something like you find in a fish tank, and bubble it away. Others actually buy air canisters and blow it in here, but they're elbow grease. Beat the water around a bit, the wort, and you'll get a nice aerated frothy wort like that. So as you can see, it's pretty frothy. Now what I'll do is I'll just go back over to my yeast. You can see my yeast is now starting to hydrate, and it's actually done quite well down there. So probably just break it a little bit. You can see it's frothing it up a little bit. So what I might do now is just get a fork and whisk it round. I've still got some hot water in here, so let me just get out a fork, draw, put it on the sink, just quickly going to knock out any of those nasties that may be on it. Run it under some cold water so it doesn't scorch the yeast. Then what I'm going to do is just going to mix this up. Again, just give the yeast a couple of minutes. Cover it back over again, and then I'm going to leave it in there for about sort of 10 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to do a hydrometer reading. So I'll take my hydrometer out from the cleaning fluid, and then we'll take a measurement with the hydrometer. So I'm just going to take it out of the cleaning fluid. We'll do that. Pour the cleaning fluid in here, keep some of that aside, and then I'll take a sample from the actual. Okay, so here's the yeast. It's probably had about 10 minutes in there at the moment. I'm just about to seal the lid of the primary fermentation chamber, and as you can see here, I've really whisked and aerated the wort up as mentioned before, so I'll do that again. I tend to move this all into the location where I'm going to finally finish it all off, so the last sort of shots probably of me pitching in the yeast and putting it all together will be somewhere else in the house where it holds a nice sort of ambient sort of 18 degrees, which is what you want it to do when you're actually brewing bitter. So I'll switch off now and you'll see me move it and we'll pitch the yeast. So there's the yeast. It's now had a good 15 minutes, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer it over to the brew. You can see there, I'm just going to knock it around a bit, pour it all in. And then what they do say is also take some of the beer out as well, and do it that way. So just going to do that, take some of the beer out. Bottom, shake it around a bit. Finally, I'm just going to stir it. So the yeast is now being pitched. I'm now going to put the lid and the airlock on. So this is the following day, and the actual fermentation started within about an hour of me pitching the yeast. So if you remember, it was about 20 to 5, and by about 20 to 6 the airlock was bubbling. So this is now around about sort of 9:30 in the morning on the Sunday, the 20th, and you can see here we've got obviously the airlock bubbling away, and the main primary fermentation chamber. You can probably just about see on the side here, about here is where the level of the yeast has actually sort of raised to, and you can probably see on my temperature gauge there we're between 20 and 22, so 21 degrees, which is a good temperature to actually brew this at. I'm going to move back and up and try and give you a shot in the vessel itself. So if I bring the light on, you can probably just about see the head of the foam of the yeast that's been generated there. So things are looking good. I'll give you an update on how the fermentation process went, but say, looks promising.